services and social distancing congregates in pews. Those are just a few ways churches are adapting to changes being made because of the pandemic. But continuing to offer communion, that didn't have an easy answer until recently. News 3 reporter Julio Avila shows how churches are still able to provide an important step in services.
Coastal Community Church has asked themselves, like other churches, how can they practice communion during an ongoing pandemic?
You had ushers who would pass out the bread and then the juice. And, that's a no-no now.
This was their answer. It's called the Communion Cup, and it added to their list of COVID-19 safety measures, including virtual services and keeping congregants socially distant.
Once we got past the description of how the people in the pews were supposed to get into the bread and then into the juice, it went fine.
Now, the Communion Cup is somewhat identical to the coffee creamers that you might find at the store. But with these cups, the host is on the top and the cup is filled with juice. These have actually been around since the 90s, but the company that produces these tell us that within the last year, the sales of these cups have surged.
Primarily due to the pandemic and people's concerns around sanitation and hygiene.
Robert Johnson is the president of the Celebration Communion Cup. As churches turned to this alternative, he says production couldn't keep up at first.
To meet that demand was a challenge in terms of being able to procure raw materials, the juice that we need, so forth and so on. So it did put a squeeze on us.
Their factory has leveled with that demand, and with a shelf life of up to 12 months, Johnson predicts churches will still use the communion cups even after the pandemic. Pastor Brooks agrees.
I would assume we're going to be using those prepackaged elements for a long time to come.
Because God's purpose for us is to become more like his son Jesus.
In Virginia Beach, Julio Avila, News 3.